In order for early childhood programs to meet standards of quality, the issues of cultural relevancy and diversity must be addressed. Within programs for young children, cultural understanding, respect, and responsiveness must be integrated into the curriculum, into the program goals, philosophies, and principles, and reflected in the environment. There are a vast array of reasons to substantiate the inclusion of cultural relevancy in early childhood programming. The first of these reasons is the issue of safety. By reflecting a child's environment and cultural identity within the classroom, he or she will feel that the classroom is an emotionally safe place to be. Children's social competence, self-esteem, and confidence can be enhanced in programs reflecting their cultural identity. Also, the inclusion of families and the community will acknowledge and reinforce their important roles in the educational process. Therefore, in order to properly address relevancy and diversity in early childhood programming on the Flathead Reservation, this program will examine some basic but important principles in relationship to both cultural relevancy and diversity. These 10 principles were adapted from the Head Start Multicultural Task Force Principles of Multicultural Programming 1989 draft. These 10 principles have been adapted for cultural relevance on the Flathead Reservation here in Montana. The first of these principles is that every individual is rooted in a culture.
Culture is identity. It makes us different one from another. Culture is our history, yours and mine. Culture tells us who we are. Robots and computers will never have it. If you take your Soma pill, you won't have it either. Culture is your birthing method. Do you squat, sit up, lay down? Culture is your umbilical cord. Do you bury it, carry it, or throw it away? Culture is our creation myth. Did Noah save us from the great flood, or did turtle raise its back? Culture is greeting one another. Do we rub cheeks, or give handshakes, or grab arms, bow, or rub noses? Culture is language, slang, humor, gesture, dance, religion, ceremony, clothing, music, and art, folkways, taboos, literature, foods, oral history, institutions, systems, governments, and more. Your culture, your identity, yours and mine. Without culture, you and I are skin and bones. We suck air and masticate our food. We are the living dead without culture. Some of the richest and most productive cultures in the world existed on the North and South American continents before the advent of the Europeans. The American Indians were the world's greatest agriculturalists and pharmacists, while at the same time the Europeans were producing the world's greatest arsenals of weapons. The Europeans' skill in war with steel swords, lances, and metal cannons, mounted on wheels pulled by animals, meant total domination over the American Indians. Will our history books ever tell the real story, that your life, your total life from the time you awake until you hit the pillow at night, is affected by the indigenous peoples of this continent, and that because you are here and not in Europe, that this is now your history too, part of your culture, your identity, yours and mine. Our government operates with a democracy like no other in the world. The Greeks espoused it, but they didn't do it. The French expounded on it, but they didn't employ it. Benjamin Franklin studied the Iroquois Confederacy and patterned the U.S. government and the Constitution after these American Indians who did live a true democracy, and that is the real story. The early colonists would not have survived without the farming techniques they learned from the American Indians. Thousands of years went into developing not only the techniques but also the varieties of foods such as corns, 10,000 types of potatoes, peanuts, chocolate, squashes, melons, beans, vanilla, tomatoes, papayas, herbs, etc. These provide over 1/2 of the world's food supply today, and agriculture now is looking for the old strains of corn discovered and developed by native peoples, as it is more resistant to disease and requires less irrigation. There is no culture in the world today who has not incorporated some food or spice from the American Indian into their cuisine. Foods are part of culture and part of identity, yours and mine.
Next, one must look at the cultures reflected within each classroom or program as the basis for culturally relevant programming. Parents and other family members and community members are the best resources for learning how to plan culturally relevant activities and how to focus the program in order to best meet the needs of the individual children. For the Salish people on the Flathead Reservation, a key agency is the Flathead Cultural Committee in St. Ignatius, Montana. The Kootenai Cultural Committee in Elmo provides similar educational information relevant to the Kootenai culture. The following interview with Clarence Woodcock from the Flathead Cultural Committee provides information about cultural plant use of the Salish and also provides an example of how one might learn more about various aspects of a culture.
We're here today up at the Twin Lakes area. I wanted to come up here because there are a lot of different plants in this little area right around in here. I could show you some of the things that we use. A lot of times we're not aware of all of the different kinds of plants that our people used. And sometimes we're just standing right over them and we don't know about them, so I'd like to, show you them. But first of all, I guess maybe I'll just say that I learned about a lot of things from my own family when we were little. We used a lot of plants, a lot of Indian medicines from my dad and my mom and my uncles and my aunt. They all told me different, we used them, so I knew about them. And then later I got more interested in them, and so I started, when I worked for the Culture Committee, I learned from Pete Beaverhead and Mitch Small Salmon, some of those old guys, and they told me about a lot of different plants too. And then of course Agnes Vandenberg, she was kind of a mentor, and she knew that I was interested in about Indian medicines and the different kind of plants that were used. So she really helped me, and she told me, what to use for different things. And whenever we were out any place, I'd ask her, and she'd tell me about them. And all of them, when I was growing up, and with Agnes and my mom, and all of them, they told us, they keep telling me, and I say us because I talk about my brothers and sisters and the people at the Culture Committee too. They tell us to use, when we use plants, we always got to give thanks for them because they're given to us by the Creator. So they're spiritual things here. So we go out and get them, and we're careful with them, and we just take what we want and we use it wisely. And whenever we dig something up, we always leave something there as kind of a payment, an offering for them. We give thanks for them. So, and they say to leave good stuff. Don't leave things you're going to throw away. Like beads, copper, coins, whatever. That's what you leave. Tobacco is also real good too. So we leave them for our offering. Right here where I'm standing, there's some plants down here on the ground that are real useful and real good. This plant, it's called Yarrow. It's good medicine. It's whenever you get a cut and there's bleed, and you take this and either chew it up or pulverize it some way and put it on your cut. I got a cut when I was going home from school one day, and I tried to reach in a window that was broken. I got cut here. So I got some of this and put it on there, and the bleeding stopped, but it was pretty deep, so I walked uptown and went to the doctor. And the doctor, when he seen this on there, He says, I got to clean this black stuff off. He didn't know what it was, but it had stopped the bleeding, I think. Otherwise, it would have bled a lot. But so it's real good medicine, and it stops the bleeding. And there's another kind that grows tall. It gets the white flowers. That's medicine too. Same thing. You can people use it for. They cook it sometimes for different things, for coughs and colds. Right down here, right beside it, there's another plant. This one. These are small, but these are called Indian name. The translation is bear's ears, and that's another good plant, good medicine for sores or cuts, different kinds of bruises. Sometimes people call it Indian Band-Aid. You kind of smash it a little bit and put it on your wherever you got your sore or bruise, and then tape it, and it'll draw all the poison out of it. It's also, Agnes and Mom used it to help one woman that had cancer. They cooked this up and she drank this, and she started feeling good and she was getting better from it, but I guess her cancer was too much. So, but it is good for cancer. So there's all kinds of medicines that people use here. I'd like to show you some more down here. If we can look behind you there's on the trees, there's not only medicine but food. So used as a food, and you cook it the same time you're making camas. You bake it in the pit and for 3 days, and after it's done, it kind of looks like a gelatin, kind of black. It's called the Indian licorice. It's got a sweet taste. It has to be baked in a pit though, but right now you wouldn't think it's good for food, but it is good food. After you cook it, you can bake it and dry it, and grind it up and dry it and save it, store it for winter time. We collect a lot. We had some cooked this spring. The ladies at the office cooked some, and we keep them. We keep it there at the culture committee for the dinners that we have during the winter time, memorial feasts or honor dinners or elders dinners. Okay, right here, this little bush here is Kinnickinnic. That's what the old people used to collect and dry and mix in with their tobacco. And later on, like now towards the fall, there's no berries on this bush, but they get little red berries, and those are, you can eat those for food. And my dad, when we were out camping and stuff, we used to get some of that, and he'd cook them over a fire, put them in a little pan, and they'd pop, kind of like popcorn, and we'd eat them like that. And so that's got a couple of good uses too. It's also medicine too. I know my mom used to ask me to get her some, and she'd use it for medicine for. I think for some people, when they get those little sores in their mouth, that canker sores or what they're called, they would use that for medicine. Right around in here in this area, there's all kinds of medicines. We can't see any, but huckleberry bushes up here. Huckleberry bushes are good medicine. Well, of course, we all like huckleberries, but the bushes are used too for medicine. You can cook. I use the leaves. I cook the leaves and make a tea for kidneys problems, and the roots, and also the tea too from the leaves are good for heart medicine. People use it to cook it up into a tea and drink it and use it for medicine that way. Okay, there's a plant here that I want to show you. It's a good medicine for stomach problems, especially for diarrhea. Pete Beaver had told me about this one. He said it's you dig up the roots if you need it, if you're out in the mountains and walking around and you need to use it right away, so you can just dig the roots and chew on it. But otherwise, you can collect the roots and cook it in the tea and drink the tea from it. So and it is a real good medicine. We've used it before, and a lot of people have collected it. This is the plant right over here. It's called, in Indian, it's tsaptsu. It's alum root. You just dig the root out and use the roots from this plant. And it grows on kind of rocky hillsides most of the time. You can find it up high up, and not really too high, but up in the mountains in the timber is usually where you find it growing along the rocky banks. There's lots around here. That's why I wanted to come up here and show you this plant. Right around in here, there's just a lot of plants too. Right up here by this stump, there's a plant that gets berries on it, thimbleberries, and well, it's just a good food. But there's a lot of things here that you can collect. It's right up here by the plant. It's got the big leaves, and it gets red berries on the top of it. Portputkan is the Indian name for it. Okay, there's a couple of trees here that I wanted to show you too, that we use the needles and the bark from. This one's called Grand Fir. Oops, step down here. You can see that the needles are flat and shiny on the bottom. Of course, we use these. You can break off branches, and I use them in sweat house because they're nice and flat, and they have a good smell in them too. But the bark is also a good medicine. You can, it's got little blisters on them. You come and peel the bark, shave get some shavings off the bark, and you cook that and make a tea and drink it for cough medicine. It's a real strong medicine and really effective. My mom always used it, and she'd have me come up in the mountains and get some for her. And one of the other people, Jim, was telling me that some of the old people, when she was little, when they had really bad coughs, whooping cough, or those kind of bad coughs, she said they would tell her to go and get a spoon and go to those little blisters and fill up a spoonful of it and take that and just drink that straight like that. And she said it really worked, but it was pretty strong. So it's a real good medicine. It has a real good smell to it too. Right next to it is a cedar, and of course, again, use this in ceremonials. You know, you could dry the cedar and use it as incense too. And also, if you want, you could. Some people I've known have used it in the sweat house too. They put it as matting in the sweat house too. Cedar, the bark is real good. Is used by the Indian people. We make bark baskets from it. You come and take a big section of bark, and then you, in the early spring when the sap is running and when the bark is not too thick, you come and fold it over and you stitch the edges, and you have a real nice berry basket, and they last for a long time after they dry. My dad used to take the cedar bark and he'd put it in strips, and he'd make weave baskets out of them. Of course, I didn't pay attention too well when I was young, so I don't know how to weave those baskets like he used to weave baskets. So, but those are the two trees I wanted to show you that are used by our people.
The third principle of multicultural programming is that culturally relevant and diverse programming requires learning accurate information about cultural groups and discarding stereotypes. This principle can be obtained by contacting people such as Clarence from key organizations and learning accurate information about their cultural groups. By acquiring knowledge about a culture through interviews with elders and other cultural specialists, teachers will be better able to discard stereotypes and institutional and personal biases. Misinformation about culture can lead to interference with communication, relationships, and respect. Often, individuals within a minority group hold perceptions of themselves and others that reflect stereotypes. Therefore, it is essential for those within a particular minority group to learn more about their heritage and their culture.
Some people are concerned in preserving the culture, but living it yearly or a day at a time is a different story. As I mentioned before, we have a dual society, a dual culture to live in. I have to live in a society that says, follow these rules. What are them rules? I have to give my children up when they're at age 6 and give them to an institution 6 to 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. The prime times when my ancestors and my people gave their children culture, lived their culture at that time. And I have to make time for my children on weekends to give them culture, because the society says that I have to give them up. When they turn age 6, they have to go into the educational system to get an education, learning how to read and write. So I give my children up for 1st to the 8th grade, from high school, from 9th grade to the 12th grade, and beyond. I have to give them up. So what do I do? What do I have to do? Why are we losing that culture then? We have to wake up to that and address those things. Address that to the teachers. Address that to the professionals. Address that into the educational system. You look at the society today. This country is a melting pot for many peoples. The Japanese, the Chinese, the Vietnamese, the blacks, the Spanish. And each one of them societies in America have their own little groups of culture. For the Native American, it's been neglected. It's not concerned about. So we have to weigh out all those facts. It's not just drugs and alcohol at those certain points. You have to weigh out those facts and bring them to these professionals in the academic world to make that aware. I would like my children to speak my language. I would like my children to dance, to sing, to have fun, to enjoy their life, and to know who they are.
The fourth principle is that cultural relevance is to be considered along with developmental levels and learning styles in selecting appropriate activities and materials for young children. Materials and activities should reflect children's experiences and backgrounds. Activities should also address diversity within the classroom. Each child comes from a unique family background which can constitute discussions and activities about acceptance of individual differences. Parents and community members should provide assistance in planning and presenting activities and materials. Elders can also greatly enrich an early childhood program. The following story by Adeline Matthias from the Kootenai Culture would hold the attention of young children and would provide them with a vast amount of historical information.
You know, in them days, when I said I was a little girl and my grandmother was blind, she become blind, you know. Seemed like it caused when she lost her old man, and she, you know what I mean, and this one day, one morning she told me, we'll catch a horse, they'll catch a horse for us, and you and I will ride double, and we'll go to Lone Pine. You know where Lone Pine is, on this side of Hot Springs, right there. And there's her brother living there. Her brother was Chief Kustara. That used to be chief of Kootenays. And she had a buggy coming from them. She bought a buggy. And if we would ride double on this one horse when we got there, then all we would do is they'd hitch it up and then we'd come back in the buggy together. So all right, everything she used to tell me it had to go. I could not say no, you know. So they got a horse for us and saddled it, and we rode double, and we went. We took this road right below this chief cliff. And this road goes, and there's a divide up here. One goes this way, one goes that way, one comes this way. So this right one we took, and we went below Chief Cliff. And if you don't want to hit Elmo, you don't go downhill. You follow the edge of the ridge of, the edge of the hill. And you come to the big road way back at the big draw. And that's how we traveled. I sat on the saddle, and I made her sit in the back. And that's a shame. You know a lot about horses, don't you? And then you're supposed to let the important person sit on the saddle, and like I should sit in the back, because I was a child. But I was a chauffeur. That couldn't be helped, because she couldn't see how would she know where to go? I had to guide the horse, I had to be the chauffeur. So that's why she sat in the back, I sat on the saddle. We went and we got back on the main road, and that's a big draw. We was coming, and just a little ways, I looked ahead. There was a man coming from this way, from right, and another guy coming from left, and they were going to both meet on the road. And I used to be scared all the time. And I told Grandma, she says, what? In Indian I was talking. I says, how does hobos look? She laughed and she said, when a person walks along, has clothes all torn up, no cap, no coat, all worn out shoes. They're hobos. I said, yeah, there's 2 of them ahead of us. Because I saw that man going this way and that way, and I thought they were hobos, you know, just, you know, transient, just passerby. And I slow my horse, you know, I didn't want to go any faster. I thought, I don't want to see both of them together. They might do something to us, you know. I used to be awful scared all the time. They went, and there was a box there, and he dug in there, and he took a bunch of papers, and he walked back, and so did the other one. And I said, no, I guess they're not hobos. They just come after their mail. There's boxes there, and they took some paper out, and they went. So we went, and we got over there. But we had to camp, because that was her brother's home. You know, in the olden days, wherever you go, Like if you go from here to St. Ignatius, all these Kootenays used to go over there for church. And some of them take them 2 days to get there in the buggy, horse and buggy. They'd go along, camp in Ronan, Pablo, wherever they have relatives there. And the next day, then they'd get there. They'd make sure that they go to church, you know. But some of them would stay right there in Pulse and then camp out there. And they'd have their teepees right around across the church where the church is now setting. And it's no more church now, Catholic church, and they change it. There's a new one, and this one here is senior citizens' place now. And then we camped with Chief and them. Next day then they worked the buggy and did everything, and they hitched up the buggy and the horse, and we started out. We was coming back, and I kept looking at the buggy, and it looked so ugly, you know, to me, you know. It looked so old and all, and I thought, if we see some people, they're going to laugh at our buggy. But still, Grandma wants it. We was coming along, and there was one place like what they're doing here. They were working the road, you know, and they had horses, nothing but horses, and no equipment, implement like they have now, you know, all those heavy equipment, implements, what do you call them? But they were using horses, and all they have is that shovel. That's the only thing they used to have to pick up dirt here and there. Whole bunch of men on the road. And I thought, oh, especially them, they're going to see our buggy and laugh. I'm not even going to stop at all. I'm going to go right on through. And one of those guys were just leading, they were driving their horse and that shovel around there. And by the time we got there, same thing happened to what I was talking about the other time, about that white guy with beards and all that, you know. And I didn't want to look at him, and then when he said, whoa, when his horse stopped and our horse stopped. Same thing happened then again. And when this guy just was going to stop his horse, he says, whoa, and ours stopped too. And then I started to hit it, and it went on. Well, we come home the same day, though, that time. That's just a short story, how I rode double with Grandma, and I made her sit in the back, and I sat on the saddle.
Children's individual learning styles should also be addressed in relationship to cultural relevancy. For example, Native American people are often predominantly right-brained. In other words, they often think holistically, as is reflected within their descriptive and elaborate languages, and they are also creative. Therefore, creative experiences for young Native American children are especially important. As for all children, creative experiences allow them the opportunity to express themselves, work through and release their emotions, allow them to problem solve, develop fine and gross motor coordination, enhance social skills when engaged in group situations, such as social dramatic play or cooperative art projects, and develop language skills. In other words, all aspects of a child's development are enhanced in creative experiences. These creative experiences can take a variety of forms: art, dramatic play, storytelling, music, dance, and movement. Again, such experiences should be made culturally relevant. For example, after learning about the cultural uses of cedar boughs, a creative art project could be painting with the boughs and discussing with the children the different cultural uses for cedar boughs. Have children create stories or books about a cedar bough. Do a creative movement experience with the children using cedar boughs. How would a cedar tree move in a light breeze, in a strong wind, to slow music, to fast music? The more creative teachers can be, the more creative the experience can be for young children. By incorporating culturally relevant materials and activities in the classroom, teachers are implementing part of the fifth principle in early childhood cultural programming. That is, that every child has the right to maintain his or her own cultural identity while acquiring skills to function in our diverse society. Children will be more open to learning when their culture is respected and also reflected within all aspects of programming. Perhaps the area of greatest need for change in this area on the Flathead Reservation is the incorporation of teaching the native languages in schools. Children have the right to learn their native languages in addition to and preferably in conjunction with other subject areas.
There was a turn at one point saying, yes, we can have language in the public schools. And when certain individuals, certain factors of the community pursued that and brought it to the public school, they were told, well, you want to teach Indian language in the school. We will see if it can be scheduled in, where we can fit it in. And the language, they said, well, we can fit it in at lunchtime. There's nothing going on at lunch. We'll give you a half hour with the children to teach them language at lunch. And this is happening at a level where you think people are educated, people have sense. Take that into consideration. Every day, when you start this cycle, every day they say English is important, arithmetic is important, social studies is important. Every day. And I'm sitting at home saying, my language is important every day. My language is important. My culture is important. At certain times of the year, we take the children out of the school to practice their culture, their religion. And they haven't took time to start realizing how important that is. The school system, the public system. We have to take those into consideration. Yes, alcohol is a part of the problem. Drugs is a part of the problem. And so is racism. Under racism comes all these disconcerns. I want my children to know certain songs. That's important. I want my children to know the importance of areas in my country, on my land. American culture didn't bring me that. American culture brought me destroy. Brought me music that I don't even understand, that don't make no sense to me at all. American culture brought me conflicts in culture, conflicts in attitude. So those things, I believe, has to be considered. And if the culture is to survive, as the Indian people is to survive, if the white society is going to survive, we have to address those. As a people, as a whole, and the country is going to survive, we have to address those things.
And you mentioned language. I have a couple of good friends that like to share some of their knowledge on language, and some of their studies is Dorothy Stillsmoking and Daryl Kipp from the Pigan Institute out of Browning, Montana. Some of their studies revealed that language involves an entire thought process. If you were an Indian child and you spoke Indian ever since you were little, that was your first language, along with your Indian language comes a thought process. And that thought process among all Indian languages is everything as a whole. You don't learn bits and parts of this and that. You just kind of learn about life in general as a whole. And when you speak to each other, you are going to sit and wait for the person to finish what their concept or their idea is. And once they share their perception with you, there might even be a few seconds before the other person's going to pick it up and know that you're finished. And then you've concluded your statements. And then you pick up what the topic was, and you might add to it, or you might go into your own observation and perception. And that thought process as a whole is what occurs when a child learns Indian languages as their first language. They learn things as a whole. They understand when they talk to grandma or grandpa, they understand to kind of stand and wait for a while until they're sure that grandpa's done talking, or they're sure that grandma's done talking. And then they know that they can be excused, or they know that they can talk. It's their turn to talk. In learning an Indian language, from the studies revealed, that's what they found out, is that the whole language as a whole involves the thought process that includes everything. Then you take an Indian child who only speaks Indian, goes to the public school system and starts learning English, picks up English as a second language. Then you have two thought processes taking place. The little boy has to go to school, and he's taught. He notices around there to be aggressive, raise his hand, get up and talk, get up and say something. Whereas at home, he's told to sit back and listen because he might learn something. There's two different thought processes taking place. So by the first grade, you got this little boy all anxious to meet Mrs. So-and-so, the teacher, Mrs. Jane Doe. Second grade, you got him all hyped up to keep learning about math, numbers. Third grade, he's not too sure what's taking place here, because that thought process from home is clashing with what's happening to the child in the classroom. Fourth grade, you got that child, a wall built up. Mrs. Jane Doe can take a hike as far as he's concerned, because he's already sensed what's happening around him. So those two thought processes, somewhere by the 4th and 5th grade, studies revealed these children were losing them. We don't know what's happening with them. What are we going to do? What are we going to teach them? We try to teach this Indian child this, we try to teach them that. I don't know, by then they're either going to make you or they're going to break you.
My husband, my children's father, used to be a hard-working man. He had all these people, his friends and all. And he said one day they were having dinner during the haying and all. And this white guy told him, he said, as long as you Indians live, don't ever want to lose your language. That comes before everything. It's just like someday and today, there's a code. You know, you make a code and they can understand somewhere. That's the way your Indian languages are. It's a code. Someday when there's a big war going, and they can use their Indian language together. And also the sign language, that should never be lost, because you can use that in different things, different ways. And so that's why these people think that it is important if they would make that come back. They should also learn the Indian language, and then the Indian sign language also. Oh, well, I'll just say that no, I'm just telling you, you did call and you said that you would be here, that you and I would use that video and talk about things. That's what I did. Yeah. And if there was the next person understand the sign language, they know what I was. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'll repeat. It says, you called and said that today you were coming to my house, so you and I could work together and talk. That's what I mean, yeah.
Francis, Carol, and Adeline have pointed out the importance of the sixth principle. This is, language carries such an abundance of cultural meaning and importance that it requires special attention for young children. One method of ensuring that children's native languages are not lost but are supported and integrated in daily experiences would be to provide children with a child care staff that is reflective and supportive of their families and their community. This seventh principle of staffing priorities should be reflected in all aspects of program management.
The Head Start program has, since its beginning, acknowledged the importance of a child's family and community. To ensure that the program is community-based, provisions have been made to hire staff from the parents and community members that share the child's ethnic background. Doing this promotes sharing of cultural and community traditions and values. It sends a strong message to the child about the importance of the family and the cultural activities that they're involved in. It also allows extended family the opportunity for involvement that they may not feel in the public school systems. One of the challenges we have had is to provide the staff with quality training. Fortunately, we have access to local resources such as Salish and Kootenai College. This relationship has been very beneficial to us. The college has individualized to meet our specific training needs.
The eighth principle for early childhood programming in relationship to cultural diversity is that children need to develop an awareness of, respect for, and appreciation of individual differences. As was previously mentioned, diversity within the classroom needs to be the starting point for discussions and activities about individual differences. This is especially important for classrooms who have enrolled only non-minority children. When classrooms implement multicultural activities to learn more about other cultures and people, the focus and approach to the delivery of these activities is essential in order to eliminate the perpetuation of stereotypes and biases. Many approaches to diversity can be detrimental to young children rather than foster positive images of individual differences. One such approach, which is most commonly used, is the tourist approach, labeled by Louise Derman Sparks and the ABC Task Force in the Anti-Bias Curriculum. In this tourist approach, classrooms visit a country or a culture for a day or a week and focus on things such as traditional foods, clothing, holidays, and celebrations. The problem with this approach is that it trivializes people and their cultures. It usually focuses on the country rather than the people. For example, it may focus on China and rather than Asian Americans. It promotes stereotypes by focusing only on the obvious artifacts and traditional aspects of a culture. Also, individual differences within cultures are not learned. Lessons on Native Americans may not describe the important differences among the various Native American cultures. Furthermore, children need culturally relevant and diverse experiences every day rather than once-a-month approach. Lastly, children need to be given skills to deal with bias. Thus, teachers need to support the 9th principle of multicultural programming by examining and challenging institutional biases. Institutional biases are values or practices which favor one group or culture by race, sex, income, physical attributes, or age. Institutional biases are reflected in practices and behaviors of the dominant group which devalue minority groups and cultures. Institutional biases can be reflected in program design. Therefore, it is essential that all aspects of programming be reviewed and examined for instances of institutional bias. Such practices may be obvious or they may be subtle and unintended. Wherever they exist or whatever the intent, they are harmful and unacceptable.
Part of my job as education coordinator of the Flathead Head Start program is to order children's books for our Head Start centers. And this spring we were given some money so that I was able to do this. When all the books came in, I reviewed them and read through them to make sure I knew what types of things were in the book so I could refer them to parents and to teachers. One of the books that I ordered was called That's What a Friend Is by P.K. Hallinan. This book fit in with our curriculum on friendships and friends, and I thought, not knowing what this book was about, I thought this would be a good selection. And I read through it, and most of the book I thought was real good. It helped to teach children about what a friend is and what it is to have a friend. As I was reading the book, I came to a page that says the following: a friend is a partner who will stand back to protect you from bullies or an engine attack. Right away I thought, whoa, engine attack, that doesn't sit right with me, and I was really surprised that a children's book would have a phrase like that in it. So I thought about it, and I thought I'm going to do something about it. Rather than just being upset about it, I crossed out the word engine in the book, thinking that we could still use it in our program, and the teachers could still read this, and they could substitute something for engine or just use an attack, and that would be fine. And then I decided to take it a step further and write the publishing company and tell them how I felt about the phrase engine attack. So in my letter to the publishing company, I wrote and said that I felt that the phrase engine attack was offensive to Native American people today and yesterday, and I felt that it was highly discriminatory, and I was really surprised that they were not aware of this and that they would use it in their book. Shortly after that, I got a response from the author also, and he thanked me for writing my letter, and he said he completely agreed with my feelings about the phrase engine attack, and that he said he welcomes the opportunity to change it at the next printing. He will change it to a friend is a partner who stands back to protect you from bullies or a monster attack. He says in his letter, please convey my apologies to anyone that this book may have offended, and please accept this autographed copy of my book. The book is entitled My First Day of School, as a gift to the Flathead Head Start. I felt the awesome responsibility, really, of that we all have as adults, parents, and teachers to learn about people in this world, differences and similarities, so we can teach things to our children in a good light. That's a very big responsibility. Also, through this experience, I would like to see more books, especially for children, that deal with Native American children as they live today. Getting up in the morning, eating food, going to school, playing outside, riding bicycles, going to movies, eating chocolate, everything. I would like to see more books like this, and I'd like to see them more widespread all over the United States. So all children know that Native American children live and are like everybody else in a lot of ways.
Children, as well, must be given skills to deal with bias. Appropriate and effective multicultural programming should directly address issues of bias and stereotypes by enabling children to identify bias and to stand up for themselves and others when confronted with biased situations. Also, children's critical thinking skills about stereotypes must be enhanced by allowing them opportunities to develop concepts of fairness and empathy. Bias and discriminatory behaviors will not go away if ignored. Teachers rarely hesitate to intervene when children hit or physically hurt each other. However, many teachers feel uncomfortable intervening when children verbally hurt each other with biased remarks, which can be equally or more harming than physical wounds. The Anti-Bias Curriculum by Louise Derman Sparks is an excellent resource book for ideas and activities on how to implement anti-bias philosophies and curricular activities in all aspects of early childhood programming. The 10th and last principle is that culturally relevant and diverse programming and practices should be incorporated in all components and services and are not limited to the classroom. In other words, not only educational components, but all components of early childhood programming must address and implement these principles if child and family development is to be maximized. Such a task will require leadership, change, risk-taking, training, resources, and coordination with community organizations and elementary schools. The benefits of children feeling positive about themselves and their backgrounds and being able to develop attitudes, knowledge, and skills for living in our diverse society and world will truly make our efforts and our commitment well worth the investment.